May 1971, high school students Cheryl Miller and Pamela Jackson were on their way to an end-of-year party when the friends they were following made a wrong turn. They doubled back, but when the driver of the other car checked the rear view, the headlights from Cheryl and Pamela's car were gone. Speculation swirled as to the fate of the missing girls, though it wasn't until decades later that the authorities finally found answers. At the start of the investigation, things didn't add up. According to the friends they were following, neither Cheryl nor Pamela had been drinking before getting in the car. They had actually been with Cheryl's grandmother in the hospital before meeting up with the group. Additionally, there had been no sign of a crash in the area where they had disappeared, and there were no tracks indicating they had gone off-road. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air. But in rural South Dakota in the early 70s, missing child cases weren't cause for the 100% manhunts you see today, with the free-spirited attitudes of the 70s having carried over the youth of this new decade. Many disappeared teens were simply thought to have packed up and headed for California. Back then, if a kid turned up missing, it actually was far more likely that they were a runaway. Recalled former Clay County Deputy Sheriff Jim Rounshorst, it was just not very darned often that you heard about kids being kidnapped. It just wasn't something you were concerned about in rural South Dakota. This theory was accepted by some in the community, but to those that knew them, Cheryl and Pamela just weren't the runaway type. Classmates called them down to earth, and according to Cheryl's older sister Kay, she left the house with only a purse that night. That's why even after the local sheriff's office scaled back its search, family and friends of the missing girls only pushed onward. They checked every ditch and ravine in the county, and Cheryl's father drove back roads for hours each day, desperately calling out for his beloved daughter and her dear friend. As time passed and forensic technology improved, authorities returned to the area sporadically, hoping to uncover any trace of the girls. They employed ground-penetrating radar and metal detectors in search of the vehicle, and they even excavated the gravel pit the two were headed to for the party. Still nothing was found. It wasn't until 2004, with the creation of the South Dakota DCI Cold Case Unit, that there finally came a break in the case. According to reports, the site of the party had not been too far from the farm where a certain classmate of Cheryl and Pamela's had grown up. The classmate was David Leakin, a serial rapist who was 14 years into a 225 years prison sentence when authorities began looking into him. Given his history of violence and his proximity to the location where the girls disappeared, Leakin became a primary suspect. This led authorities to search the Leakin farm after David's younger sister claimed to have seen family members burning a large amount of evidence on the property years prior. After a quick search, it appeared she was right. Two hubcaps were unearthed and dozens of bones were found buried beneath the property's septic tank. Women's clothing, personal effects, and letters, and a pair of rubber gloves were seized. A single red purse were found tucked away in the farmhouse rafters. Prosecutors moved immediately to add the murders of the two girls to Leakin's charges, and soon after, a prison informant captures Leakin confessing to the murders on tape. The case appeared open and shut, then it all fell apart. The confession had actually been faked by one of Leakin's fellow prisoners, and the items taken from the farm couldn't be directly connected to the two girls. Even the bones beneath the septic tank turned out to be those of butchered animals. With no concrete evidence to go on, the charges against Leakins were dropped. It was now 2008 and authorities were no closer to uncovering the fate of Cheryl and Pamela than they were 37 years prior. Fortunately, they wouldn't have to go another 4 decades before the real truth came out. 2013, a local fisherman walking along Broad Creek stumbled upon a large shape sticking out of the water. He moved closer expecting to find a few rocks or some discarded trash. Instead, he discovered the underside of a rushed car jutting from the mud. Authorities moved to pull the car from the creek, which they soon determined was a 1960s Studebaker large, the same make and model of Cheryl's car. The remains within were completely unidentifiable. The one piece of evidence managed to survive after all these years. A purse inside, investigators found everything from loose change and house keys to photos and letters from friends. But one look at the faded driver's license told authorities everything they needed to know about this wreck. It belonged to Cheryl, meaning that the remains inside were those of the two missing girls. The 42-year-old cold case had finally been solved, but authorities still had to answer one glaring question: what had happened? An examination of the vehicle revealed that the car was in third gear when it crashed, and damage to one of the wheels indicates that a tire might have blown. To investigators, it appeared that the car had popped tire, careened off the road, and landed submerged in Wool Creek. Regardless of the exact cause, the Miller and Jackson families now have the closure they had been seeking as they finally lay Cheryl and Pamela to rest. "It's been so many years," said Cheryl's sister Kay. "It will be nice to have her home."